The morning of October 14, 1943, over Schweinfurt, Germany. At 23,000 feet, Bombardier Lieutenant Robert Hughes steadied himself in the plexiglass nose of a B-17 flying fortress named 9 Lives. The temperature read -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Ice crystals formed on his oxygen mask with each exhale. Through the crosshairs of his Norden Bombsight, he could see the ball-bearing factories below the target that would cost the 8th Air Force 60 bombers and 600 men before the day was done. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Hughes adjusted the stabilization gyroscope, his thick gloves making the delicate work almost impossible. The German pilots, circling like wolves below, had dismissed American precision bombing as fantasy. Their own Luftwaffe had abandoned daylight raids over Britain, convinced that hitting specific targets from high altitude was technologically impossible. They believed the Americans were chasing an engineer's dream while German flak and fighters would tear them apart. What the Germans didn't know was that Hughes carried in that freezing bombardier compartment a device so secret that he was under orders to destroy it with thermite grenades if his plane went down. The Norden Bombsight, a 64-pound analog computer that American propaganda claimed could drop a bomb into a pickle barrel from 20,000 feet. The Germans had heard these claims. They had laughed. Precision bombing from such heights, they insisted, was pure American arrogance. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. But as Hughes peered through those crosshairs on that October morning, watching the factory complex grow larger in his viewfinder, he was about to demonstrate why the United States had spent $1.5 billion, half the cost of the Manhattan Project, developing and producing this single piece of equipment. The Norden Bombsight would not just change the way America fought the air war. It would challenge everything the Germans believed about aerial warfare, forcing them to confront a terrible reality. While they had been perfecting the art of terror bombing, the Americans had been quietly revolutionizing the science of precision destruction. The story of the Norden Bombsight begins not in the skies over Germany, but in the mind of a Dutch engineer named Carl Norden, who emigrated to America in 1904. Norden was obsessed with a single problem that had plagued military strategists since the first planes dropped bombs in World War I. How to accurately deliver explosives from a moving aircraft onto a stationary target. It seemed simple in theory. In practice, it required solving one of the most complex ballistic calculations imaginable. Consider what a bombardier faced in 1943. His B-17 was traveling at 200 miles per hour at an altitude of 25,000 feet. The bombs would take 43 seconds to reach the ground. During that time, the aircraft would travel nearly 4 miles. Wind speeds varied at different altitudes, sometimes by 50 miles per hour or more between the bomber's position and the ground. The Earth itself was rotating beneath the falling bombs. Temperature affected air density, which affected the bomb's trajectory. Even the bomber's own movement, slight turns, altitude changes, vibrations from the engines could throw off the calculations. German bombing doctrine had essentially given up on solving this problem. The Luftwaffe's approach to strategic bombing, refined during the Spanish Civil War and the London Blitz, relied on mass and terror rather than precision. Flying at lower altitudes, often at night, German bombers would saturate entire city districts with explosives. If you couldn't hit a specific factory, the reasoning went, destroy the entire neighborhood around it. Kill the workers, destroy their homes, break their will to fight. The Americans, isolated by 2 oceans and watching the European war from a distance, had developed a radically different philosophy. Influenced by the industrial efficiency experts who had revolutionized American manufacturing, the U.S. Army Air Forces became convinced that strategic bombing could be surgical, scientific, precise, destroy specific bottleneck targets, ball-bearing plants, oil refineries, aircraft factories, and you could paralyze an entire war machine without the wholesale slaughter of civilians. This doctrine required technology that didn't exist until Carl Norden created it. The Norden Bombsight was essentially an analog computer that continuously calculated the precise moment to release bombs to hit a designated target. It consisted of two main components: a stabilization platform that kept the sight level regardless of the aircraft's movement, and a computer that calculated the trajectory based on altitude, airspeed, wind drift, and the ballistic characteristics of the bombs being dropped. The stabilization system alone was a marvel of engineering. Using gyroscopes spinning at incredibly high speeds, it could maintain its orientation even as the bomber bounced through flak bursts and turbulence. The sight was so stable that bombardiers reported they could read newspaper headlines on the ground from 20,000 feet, an exaggeration, but not by much. The computer component was equally sophisticated. The bombardier would input the aircraft's altitude and airspeed, then locate the target through the telescope. As the plane approached, he would keep the crosshairs centered on the target using two control knobs. The bombsight would automatically calculate the drift caused by wind, continuously updating the release point. When the aircraft reached the calculated position, the sight would automatically release the bombs. But here's what made the Norden truly revolutionary. During the bomb run, the bombardier actually flew the plane. Through an autopilot connection, the bombsight took control of the aircraft for those crucial final moments, making tiny adjustments to ensure the plane maintained the exact heading and altitude needed for accuracy. The pilot, trained to never relinquish control of his aircraft, had to sit there while his bombardier and a machine guided them through the most dangerous moments of the mission. The security around the Norden bombsight was unlike anything in American military history up to that point. Each device was assigned to a specific bombardier who was personally responsible for it. They were stored in air-conditioned vaults under 24-hour guard. Bombardiers carried 45 caliber pistols, not just for personal protection, but with explicit orders to destroy the sight rather than let it fall into enemy hands. The training program was equally intense. Bombardiers spent months at bases in Texas and New Mexico, where clear weather allowed for constant practice. They studied physics, meteorology, and ballistics. They spent hundreds of hours hunched over practice sites, learning to make the minute adjustments that meant the difference between hitting a factory and dropping bombs into empty fields. The propaganda machine went into overdrive. American newspapers published stories about the miraculous bombsight that could drop a bomb into a pickle barrel from 20,000 feet. Newsreels showed bombardiers in training hitting targets with uncanny accuracy. The message was clear: American technology and American precision would win the war without the barbarism of area bombing. The Germans, reading intelligence reports about these claims, were skeptical. Their own experience told them precision bombing from high altitude was impossible. The Luftwaffe had tried it over England and failed. Weather alone made such accuracy fantasy Europe was covered in clouds more than 200 days a year. How could the Americans hit what they couldn't even see? Moreover, German fighter pilots and anti-aircraft crews were confident they could stop any daylight bombing campaign. The American B-17s and B-24s might be heavily armed, but they were slow and flew in predictable formations. German fighters, particularly the new Focke-Wulf 190, could slash through bomber formations with cannon fire. Flak batteries, using sophisticated gun-laying radar, could put up walls of exploding shells at precise altitudes. The early American raids seemed to confirm German skepticism. In 1942 and early 1943, 8th Air Force bombers often missed their targets entirely. Weather forced many missions to bomb by radar through clouds, essentially area bombing by default. Losses were staggering. The infamous Schweinfurt-Regensburg mission of August 17, 1943, saw 60 bombers shot down out of 376, a 16% loss rate that was unsustainable. German propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels wrote in his diary that the American precision bombing campaign was dying of its own absurdity. Field Marshal Erhard Milch, head of German aircraft production, declared that American bombers would never significantly impact German industry. They were too few, their losses too heavy, their accuracy too poor. But something was happening that the Germans didn't fully grasp. With each mission, American bombardiers were getting better. They were learning to compensate for European weather patterns, different from anything they'd encountered in training over the American Southwest. They developed techniques for bombing through partial cloud cover, using glimpses of landmarks to update their calculations. Most importantly, they were learning to stay calm under conditions that training never fully replicated, when flak was bursting so close you could smell the cordite, when German fighters were coming head-on with cannons blazing, when the bomber next to you exploded and disappeared in a ball of flame. Lieutenant Colonel John Jack Armour, lead bombardier for the 91st Bomb Group, developed what became known as the Armour method of bombing. Instead of individual bombardiers dropping their bombs independently, the entire formation would drop when the lead bombardier released. This concentrated the bomb pattern and reduced the time the formation had to fly straight and level the most vulnerable part of the mission. By late 1943, accuracy was improving dramatically. Post-strike reconnaissance photos showed that when weather permitted visual bombing, American bombers were putting 40% of their bombs within 1,000 feet of the target, far from the pickle barrel propaganda, but devastating when hundreds of bombers attacked in formation. The Germans began to notice. Ball-bearing production at Schweinfurt dropped by 67% after the October 14 raid. The Focke-Wulf plant at Marienburg was severely damaged by just 50 bombers, who achieved unprecedented accuracy on October 9, 1943. The Leuna synthetic oil plant, critical for German fuel production, was hit repeatedly with such precision that production virtually ceased. What truly shocked German commanders was the Americans' ability to hit specific buildings within larger complexes. At the Messerschmitt plant in Augsburg, American bombers destroyed the fuselage assembly building while leaving administrative buildings untouched. This wasn't the random destruction of area bombing, this was surgical, deliberate, targeted. German fighter pilot Johannes Steinhoff wrote in his memoirs about watching American bomb runs. "We could not believe they maintained such tight formations under our attacks. The bombardiers stayed at their sights even as we raked the nose compartments with cannon fire. They would not deviate, would not break off their runs. It was magnificent and terrible." The Norden Bombsight forced the Germans to completely restructure their war production. Instead of large centralized factories, they dispersed production into smaller facilities, often underground or hidden in forests. This saved the factories, but drastically reduced efficiency. What had taken 100 man-hours to produce in a purpose-built factory now took 300 man-hours in dispersed facilities. Albert Speer, German Minister of Armaments, later testified that the American precision bombing campaign, enabled by the Norden Bombsight, forced Germany to devote a third of its total war production to defending against and recovering from bomb damage. Hundreds of thousands of workers who could have been producing tanks and planes were instead clearing rubble and rebuilding factories. Tens of thousands of anti-aircraft guns that could have been used against Soviet tanks were instead pointed skyward at American bombers. But the real psychological impact came from the nature of precision bombing itself. When the RAF bombed at night, dropping tons of explosives across entire city districts, it was terrifying but somehow impersonal, a natural disaster, like an earthquake or storm. The American daylight raids were different. Workers in factories knew they, specifically, were targets. A ball-bearing plant worker in Schweinfurt could see the American bombers circling to line up their bomb run, could watch them turn onto their final approach, could see the bombs falling directly toward his workplace. It was personal, deliberate, calculated. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The most profound irony of the Norden Bombsight story came from an unexpected source captured German pilots. When interrogated, many expressed shock at American bombing accuracy. One Luftwaffe major, shot down in early 1944, told his interrogators, "We were told American precision bombing was propaganda. Then I saw the Regensburg Messerschmitt plant after your attack. You destroyed the machine shops and assembly buildings, but barely touched the workers' cafeteria. How is this possible from 25,000 feet? The answer lay not just in the Norden Bombsight's technology, but in the entire system the Americans had built around it. The bombsight was the culmination of American industrial philosophy, the belief that any problem could be solved with enough engineering, training, and systematic approach. While the Germans had perfected the warrior ethos of the fighter pilot, Americans had turned bombing into an industrial process. By early 1944, the 8th Air Force was putting 1,000 bombers over Germany in a single mission. Each bomber carried a Norden bombsight. Each bombardier had hundreds of hours of training. The bomb groups had developed sophisticated tactics for mutual support and concentration of firepower. Fighter escorts, particularly the P-51 Mustang with its long range, could now protect the bombers all the way to Berlin and back. The Germans watched their war production crumble under this assault. The great ball-bearing works at Schweinfurt never fully recovered. The synthetic oil plants at Leuna and Merseburg operated at 20% capacity. Aircraft production, despite Speer's Herculean efforts at dispersal, fell far behind Allied production. But perhaps the most telling evidence of the Norden bombsight's impact came from an unexpected source. In March 1944, the Germans introduced their own precision bombsight, the Lofte 7C, clearly inspired by captured Norden technology. It was a tacit admission that the American approach had been right all along, but it was too late. Germany no longer had the bombers, the fuel, or the trained crews to employ precision bombing. The story reaches its climax in February 1945, during the bombing of Dresden. This mission has become controversial for its devastating impact on civilians, but it also demonstrated the terrible efficiency American precision bombing had achieved. While the RAF created a firestorm through area bombing at night, American B-17s returned the next day to precisely target the rail yards and remaining industrial facilities. Through smoke and fire, using their Norden bombsights, they put their bombs exactly where planned. A German railway engineer who survived the raid later recalled, "The British bombing was chaos, horror everywhere. But when the Americans came, even through all the smoke, they hit the marshalling yards with such precision that undamaged locomotives just meters away from the impact points remained untouched. It was like they were performing surgery with explosives." The ultimate vindication of the Norden bombsight came from an unlikely source. Soviet intelligence reports captured after the war. The Soviets, allies but also future rivals, had carefully studied American bombing effectiveness. A top-secret Soviet analysis from 1945 concluded, "The American Norden bombsight has achieved accuracy rates that fundamentally challenge our understanding of strategic air power." While never reaching the propagandistic claims of pickle-barrel accuracy, it has proven that precision bombing from high altitude is not only possible but devastatingly effective. The human cost of this technological triumph was staggering. Over 26,000 American airmen died in the skies over Europe. Each B-17 or B-24 that went down took 10 men with it. The bombardiers, sitting in their exposed plexiglass noses, were particularly vulnerable. German fighters learned to target the bombardier position, knowing that without him, the entire bomber's mission was useless. Staff Sergeant Michael Aruth, a bombardier with the 95th Bomb Group, flew 35 missions over Germany. He later wrote, "The Norden was magnificent and terrible. Magnificent because it worked, because we could put bombs on target from 5 miles up. Terrible because it meant we had to fly straight and level for those endless minutes of the bomb run, no evasive action allowed, while flak burst all around us and fighters came in for the kill." The ethical implications haunted many bombardiers long after the war. They had been told they were conducting precision warfare, avoiding civilian casualties through technological superiority. The reality was more complex. Even with the Norden bombsight, bombs went astray. Weather forced compromise. Smoke and clouds obscured targets. The pressure of combat affected accuracy. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Morgan, pilot of the famous Memphis Belle, reflected years later, We told ourselves we were hitting military targets, and mostly we were. But from 25,000 feet, you don't see the homes next to the factory, the families in the basements. The Norden gave us precision, but precision in war is still measured in hundreds of feet, not inches. Yet the strategic impact was undeniable. By war's end, German industrial production was crippled, not from lack of workers or raw materials, but from the systematic destruction of key facilities. The transportation network was shattered. Oil production virtually ceased. The Luftwaffe, despite having thousands of advanced fighters, couldn't fly them for lack of fuel and trained pilots. General Carl Spaatz, commander of U.S. Strategic Air Forces in Europe, stated in his final report, "The Norden Bombsight enabled us to wage strategic warfare as it had been envisioned but never achieved the systematic dismantling of an enemy's ability to wage war through precise application of air power." The Germans had entered the war, convinced that terror bombing was the future of aerial warfare. They ended it underground, their factories dispersed and hidden, their cities in ruins, finally understanding what American precision bombing could achieve. The propaganda claim of dropping a bomb in a pickle barrel from 25,000 feet remained propaganda. But the reality, the ability to consistently hit factory-sized targets from high altitude in daylight, proved devastating enough. Hermann Göring, head of the Luftwaffe, stated during his Nuremberg trial, "When I saw the American bombers over Germany in daylight, I knew the war was lost. When I learned of their bombing accuracy with the Norden sight, I understood we had fundamentally misjudged American capabilities." Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. The legacy of the Norden Bombsight extends beyond World War II. It established precision as the defining characteristic of American air power, a philosophy that continues through GPS-guided munitions today. It demonstrated that technology, properly applied with sufficient training and resources, could revolutionize warfare. But perhaps its most important legacy was proving the Germans wrong about American resolve and capability. They had dismissed precision bombing as impossible, American technology as inferior, daylight bombing as suicidal. The 26,000 American airmen who died over Europe proved them wrong with their lives. The Norden Bombsight, that 64-pound analog computer, was their tool of choice. In the end, the Germans' laughter at American precision bombing claims turned to ash literally. Their factories lay in ruins, targeted and destroyed with a precision they had deemed impossible. The Norden Bombsight hadn't achieved pickle barrel accuracy. It had achieved something far more important. It had revolutionized strategic warfare and helped win the war. Colonel Curtis LeMay, who would later lead the bombing campaign against Japan, summarized it best. "The Norden Bombsight taught us that in modern war, precision is everything. Not because its humane war is never humane, but because it's effective. The Germans learned this lesson too late." Today, the Norden Bombsight sits in museums, an analog relic in a digital age. But for those who understand its history, it represents a turning point, the moment when American industrial ingenuity met the harsh realities of warfare and emerged victorious. The Germans had laughed at the idea of precision bombing from 25,000 feet. By May 1945, no one was laughing anymore. The story of the Norden Bombsight is ultimately a very American story, the triumph of engineering over tradition, of systematic training over individual heroism, of industrial might over warrior culture. It's also a reminder that in warfare, the side that dismisses its enemy's capabilities as impossible often learns, too late, that impossible is just an engineering problem waiting to be solved. As Lieutenant Robert Hughes, the bombardier we met at the beginning of this story, wrote to his wife after the war, "They told us we could drop a bomb in a pickle barrel from 25,000 feet. We never found a pickle barrel that high up, but we found ball-bearing plants, oil refineries, and aircraft factories. And that, it turned out, was enough." Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe. The transformation of American bombing accuracy didn't happen overnight. It was forged in the crucible of combat, paid for in blood, and refined through bitter experience. To understand how the Norden Bombsight went from propaganda promise to strategic reality, we need to examine the human element, the men who carried this technology into battle, and the Germans who faced its consequences. Master Sergeant Theodore Dutch van Kirk, navigator and bombardier on the Enola Gay, began his combat career in 1943 flying missions over Germany. Before his famous mission to Hiroshima, he flew 58 combat missions in Europe. Van Kirk later recalled, "The Norden was only as good as the man using it. Under perfect conditions in training, sure, we could hit small targets, but try using it when the temperature is -50. Your fingers are numb even through heated gloves. Flak is exploding so close you can taste the metal, and an FW-190 is coming straight at you with its wings lighting up from cannon fire." The learning curve was steep and deadly. In the summer of 1943, only about 20% of American bombs fell within 1,000 feet of their targets. By the spring of 1944, that number had risen to 40%. By the war's end, under ideal conditions, some bomb groups were achieving 60% accuracy within 1,000 feet. These numbers might seem unimpressive compared to modern precision weapons, but they represented a revolution in aerial warfare. The improvement came from countless small innovations born of necessity. Bombardiers learned that the Norden's gyroscopes performed differently at extreme altitudes. They discovered that European industrial haze created optical illusions that threw off their aim points. They found that contrails from preceding bomb groups could create wind patterns that hadn't existed moments before. Captain John Red Morgan, lead bombardier for the 100th Bomb Group, developed a technique for compensating for the bomber's tendency to rise slightly when the bombs released, suddenly lightening the aircraft by thousands of pounds. This tiny adjustment, a fraction of a degree on the bomb site, could mean the difference between hitting a factory and missing it entirely. The Germans, meanwhile, were developing their own countermeasures. They created smoke generators that could obscure entire city districts within minutes of an air raid warning. They built dummy factories, complete with false roads and railways, to confuse bombardiers. They painted important buildings to look like ruins and camouflaged critical facilities to blend with surrounding countryside. Luftwaffe Major Heinz Noak, a fighter ace with 33 confirmed kills, wrote in his diary, "The Americans are machines, precise and relentless. We attack them, we shoot down their comrades, we fill the sky with flak, yet still they come on their bomb runs, straight and level, their bombardiers glued to those damned bomb sites." The German pilots developed specific tactics to disrupt the bomb runs. They would attack from 12 o'clock high directly ahead and above, targeting the bombardier positions. They dropped aerial bombs into the formations. They fired rockets designed to break up the tight defensive boxes the Americans flew, yet still the bombardiers stayed at their sites. The psychological warfare was intense on both sides. German propaganda broadcasted the names of captured bombardiers, reading their letters from home over the radio to demoralize their comrades. American bombers dropped leaflets showing aerial photos of destroyed German factories, annotated with accuracy statistics to demoralize German workers. One such leaflet, dropped over Stuttgart in February 1944, showed the Daimler-Benz engine factory with circles drawn around destroyed buildings. The text read, "Your leaders said precision bombing was impossible. These photographs prove otherwise. We can hit any factory, any railway yard, any refinery. The choice is yours: surrender or see your entire industrial base systematically destroyed." The Germans were forced to adapt their entire industrial strategy. Speer implemented a program called industrial dispersal, moving critical production underground or into small, scattered facilities. The Mittelwerk facility, carved into a mountain in central Germany, produced V-2 rockets in tunnels, immune to bombing. But this dispersal came at enormous cost in efficiency and resources. A captured German industrial report from December 1944 revealed the true impact. The American precision bombing campaign has forced us to devote 40% of our total industrial capacity to dispersal, repair, and defense. Every factory must now have smoke generators, camouflage, duplicate facilities, and repair crews. What we could once produce in one factory now requires 5. The human cost of operating the Norden Bombsight extended beyond combat casualties. The intense concentration required during bomb runs, sometimes lasting 10 minutes or more, took a psychological toll. Bombardiers reported nightmares where they couldn't get the crosshairs to align, where the bombsight wouldn't respond, where they missed their targets and had to fly the mission again and again. Lieutenant William Lovett, a bombardier with the 391st Bomb Group, was diagnosed with what would now be called PTSD after his 25th mission. His medical report noted, "Patient exhibits extreme anxiety related to precision requirements of his duty, reports obsessive thoughts about bomb accuracy, calculating drift and trajectory in his sleep, shows physical tremors when discussing bomb runs." Yet these men persisted, driven by the belief that precision bombing could shorten the war. This belief was reinforced by intelligence reports showing the strategic impact of their missions. When the 15th Air Force destroyed the Ploiești oil refineries in Romania through a series of precision raids in 1944, German fuel production dropped by 90%. Intercepted German communications revealed panic at the highest levels. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel wrote to Hitler, "The American bombing accuracy has improved to the point where no vital installation is safe. They can put enough bombs on a specific building to ensure its destruction. We must assume that any target they choose to attack will be eliminated." The weather remained the Norden Bombsight's greatest enemy. Europe's climate meant visual bombing was possible only about 1/3 of the time. The Americans developed various solutions: radar bombing, offset aiming points, weather scouts, but nothing matched the accuracy of visual bombing with the Norden. This led to agonizing decisions. Bomb groups would circle over Germany, burning precious fuel, waiting for cloud breaks. Sometimes they would return to base with full bomb loads rather than waste them on blind bombing. Other times, under pressure to maintain bombing tempo, they would bomb through clouds, essentially conducting area bombing despite their precision doctrine. Colonel Curtis LeMay, commanding the 305th Bomb Group, made a controversial decision in November 1943. Frustrated by weeks of weather preventing visual bombing, he led his group on a radar-guided mission against Bremen. The bombs scattered across the city, causing significant civilian casualties. LeMay later said, "We had the finest bombsight in the world, but it was useless if we couldn't see the target. The Germans were producing submarines while we waited for clear skies." The moral complexity of precision bombing became increasingly apparent. Even successful precision strikes caused civilian casualties. Workers were in the factories being bombed. Homes surrounded industrial targets. The blast effects of 1,000-pound bombs didn't respect the neat target boundaries drawn on mission maps. Father Edward Dowling, a chaplain with the 8th Air Force, wrestled with these ethical questions. He wrote, "The boys come to me asking if what they're doing is moral. They've been told they're conducting precision warfare, hitting only military targets, but they see the reconnaissance photos afterward, the destroyed homes, the refugee columns. I tell them they're fighting to end a greater evil, but I see the doubt in their eyes." The Germans experienced this moral complexity from the receiving end. Workers in targeted factories faced an impossible choice: continue working and risk death from precision strikes, or refuse and face execution for sabotage. Many developed a fatalistic attitude, showing up for work despite the danger. Hans Müller, a lathe operator at the Schweinfurt ball-bearing plant, survived 3 major raids. He recalled, "We could see the American bombers circling to line up their approach. We knew they were aiming specifically for our workshop. Some men ran. Most of us stayed at our machines. What else could we do? At least the Americans were trying to hit the factory, not our homes like the British night raids." The technology race continued throughout the war. The Germans developed the Knickbein and X-Gerät radio navigation systems for their own bombing accuracy. The Americans countered with improved versions of the Norden, including the Sperry S-1 bombsight and eventually radar-guided bombing systems. But the Norden remained the workhorse of American precision bombing. By late 1944, the Norden bombsight had evolved from closely guarded secret to mass-produced weapon. Over 90,000 units were manufactured during the war at a cost of $8,000, each roughly $250,000 in today's money. The sight that had once been stored in air-conditioned vaults was now being maintained in freezing bomber bases across England. Technical Sergeant Anthony Cacciatore, a bombsight maintenance specialist, serviced dozens of Norden sites. Each one had its own personality, he recalled. Some ran smooth as silk, others were temperamental. We'd work all night to calibrate them perfectly, knowing that a tiny adjustment error could mean the difference between hitting a target and killing civilians. The culmination of the Norden bombsight's evolution came during Operation Clarion in February 1945. Over 3,000 Allied bombers and fighters attacked German transportation targets in a coordinated campaign designed to paralyze movement throughout the Reich. American bombers, using their Norden bombsights, struck specific railway junctions, bridges, and marshalling yards with devastating accuracy. German railway official Friedrich Hollander documented the results. The Americans hit 27 major rail junctions in a single day, with such precision that repair was impossible. They destroyed the switching mechanisms, the signal boxes, the control towers, everything needed to run trains while leaving much of the track intact but useless. It was surgical destruction on an industrial scale. The psychological impact on German leadership was profound. Hitler, who had once dismissed American bombing as ineffective, became obsessed with defending against it. He diverted resources from the Eastern Front to defend German airspace. He ordered the development of wonder weapons like the Me-262 jet fighter, specifically to counter American daylight bombers. Luftwaffe General Adolf Galland later testified, "The Norden bombsight forced us to completely restructure our air defense. We had to develop new fighters, new tactics, new weapons, all to stop bombers that could hit their targets from altitudes we once thought safe. It absorbed resources we desperately needed elsewhere." The intelligence war surrounding the Norden was equally intense. German agents in the United States attempted to steal bombsight plans. The Americans planted false information about improved versions. Both sides interrogated captured airmen for details about bombing technology and tactics. One of the war's great ironies was that the Germans had actually obtained complete plans for an earlier version of the Norden bombsight before the war through a spy named Hermann Lang, but they dismissed it as too complex and unreliable for practical use. The time they realized their error, American bombardiers had refined its use through thousands of combat missions. Captain Frederick Bock, who would later pilot the B-29 that dropped the atomic bomb on Nagasaki, flew 35 missions over Germany as a B-17 pilot. He observed, "The Norden wasn't perfect. It couldn't really drop a bomb in a pickle barrel from 25,000 feet. But it didn't need to be perfect. It just needed to be better than anything else available, and it was." The statistics tell the strategic story. By war's end, American bombers had dropped over 1.5 million tons of bombs on German targets. While exact accuracy figures are disputed, post-war analysis showed that American daylight bombing destroyed or severely damaged over 3/4 of Germany's oil production, 2/3 of its aircraft production, and half of its tank production. More importantly, the precision bombing campaign forced Germany to fundamentally restructure its war economy. Resources that could have gone to offensive weapons were diverted to air defense. Workers who could have been soldiers were needed to repair bomb damage. Transportation that could have supplied the front lines was needed to relocate factories. Speer, in his post-war interrogation, made a startling admission. The American precision bombing campaign, particularly after they solved their fighter escort problem, made German victory impossible. We could replace the losses from British area bombing. It was horrible but random. But when the Americans could reliably destroy specific bottleneck facilities, our entire production system began to collapse. The veterans of the bombing campaign had complex feelings about their role. They were proud of their technical achievement and strategic impact, but haunted by the human cost. Many bombardiers reported that they never looked down during bomb release, focusing only on their crosshairs, trying to maintain the fiction that they were hitting things, not people. Staff Sergeant James McElroy, a bombardier who flew 29 missions, wrote in his memoir, "We told ourselves we were conducting precision warfare, and compared to what came before, we were. But precision is relative. A bomb that misses its target by 500 feet is still precise by World War II standards. But 500 feet could be the distance between a factory and a school." The legacy of precision bombing extends to modern warfare. The GPS-guided munitions of today are direct descendants of the philosophy pioneered by the Norden Bombsight. The belief that technology can make warfare more precise, and therefore more effective, and potentially less destructive to civilians. Yet the moral questions raised by the Norden Bombsight remain relevant. Precision is relative. Technology can reduce but not eliminate civilian casualties. The promise of surgical strikes can sometimes justify military actions that might otherwise be questioned. As the war in Europe entered its final months, the Norden Bombsight had proven its worth beyond question. German industrial production was crippled. The Luftwaffe was grounded for lack of fuel. Transportation networks were shattered. The precision bombing campaign hadn't won the war alone, but it had made German defeat inevitable. The final irony came in April 1945, as American bombers ranged over a defeated Germany almost unopposed. There were few targets left worth hitting. The precise destruction enabled by the Norden Bombsight had been so effective that there was little left to destroy. Colonel Joseph Krajewski, flying his 50th and final mission on April 16, 1945, recorded, "We flew over Germany looking for targets of opportunity. The great factories were rubble, the rail yards were twisted metal, the refineries were burnt shells. The Norden Bombsight had done its work too well. There was nothing left to bomb." In the ruins of the Reich, Chancellery, discovered after Berlin fell, Allied intelligence found a German technical evaluation of captured Norden bombsights. The report, dated March 1945, concluded, "The American Norden bombsight represents a technical achievement we failed to anticipate or match. Combined with American industrial capacity and training methods, it has given them a strategic bombing capability that has exceeded our worst fears." The document continued, "We dismissed American claims of precision bombing as propaganda. We believed our fighters and flak would make daylight bombing too costly. We were wrong on both counts. The Americans accepted the casualties and achieved the precision. Our failure to recognize this possibility has cost us the war." The story of the Norden Bombsight is thus a tale of technological triumph and human tragedy, of precision and devastation, of American ingenuity and German miscalculation. It proved that precision bombing from high altitude was possible, revolutionizing aerial warfare forever. But it also demonstrated that even precision warfare carries a terrible human cost. The Germans had laughed at the idea of hitting targets from 25,000 feet. They stopped laughing when their factories lay in ruins, targeted and destroyed with a precision they had deemed impossible. The Norden Bombsight had delivered on enough of its promise to help win the war, even if it never quite achieved the pickle barrel accuracy of propaganda legend. In the end, the measure of the Norden Bombsight's success wasn't whether it could hit a pickle barrel from 25,000 feet. It was whether it could hit a ball-bearing factory, an oil refinery, or an aircraft assembly plant. And that, as the ruins of German industry testified, it could do with deadly effectiveness. The last word belongs to General James Doolittle, commander of the 8th Air Force in the final year of the war. The Norden Bombsight gave us the ability to conduct strategic warfare as it had been envisioned but never achieved the systematic, precise dismantling of an enemy's ability to wage war. It wasn't perfect, war never is, but it was revolutionary. And, in the skies over Germany, revolution was enough. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel.